Today we're going to be talking a little bit. I'm going to actually start in Esther chapter 2 and verse 5. I've talked to this with a couple of you already. This is something I actually preached over at South County Line, and God keeps on bringing it back up to me, so I'm going to be going over it today. But we're going to be going to Esther chapter 2 and verse 5. That's where I'm going to start today. Esther chapter 2 and verse 5, Crystal. Esther chapter 2 and verse 5, it says, In Shushan, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, I don't know, and the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Keep that in mind, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. All right, now we're going to skip over to Esther chapter 3, verse 1. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him into this, and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. The Agagite. Okay, keep that in your mind. All right, the son of Kish is who Mordecai was from, right? And then Haman is an Agagite. All right, now we're going to skip back to 1 Samuel. Chapter 15 and verse 32. But first I want to point out that when they talk about the, but when they anoint Saul, as you guys are going through to 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 32 is where I'm going to start. But as I'm talking about that, or as you guys are looking this up, I want to give you kind of a backstory. All right, Samuel anoints Saul to be king in 1 Samuel chapter 10. All right, and it talks about how King Saul was a Benjamite, the son of Kish. Okay, and this is kind of a big deal. This is like, basically Israel had asked God for a human king because God wasn't enough. Yeah, that's literally a thing that happened. And basically God tells Samuel to anoint King Saul. All right, and people start seeing that Israel is drawing together because before they were led by God, and that wasn't enough for them, so they kind of broke apart from each other, and they warred separately. They did everything separate. But when they got a human king, when they seen how Saul held himself against the Ammonites, the Ammonites, they literally drawed them together. So everybody started getting to the extent where they were kind of trying to attack Israel because they got scared, right? Well, the story of Saul is a long story, but the end result is Saul doesn't kill King Agag. Remember that part about Haman? He's an Agagite, so he's the son of Agag. And when Samuel comes in, he comes into hearing oxen bellowing. And he had just told King Saul to kill everyone, because that's what God had told King Saul. He said, these people are going to hinder your people in for years. It's time you ended this bondage. It's time you killed it now before it becomes a thing. And King Saul's has a soft spot for King Agag because he's a strong king just like him. And he saves the choicest oxen. He saves the choicest of all the things that they had, and he saves it. And he saves Agag and his family. All right? That's where we're starting at. I'm just giving you the backstory so it all makes sense, okay? In 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 32, it says, "And then Samuel said, 'Bring Agag, the king of the Amalekites, here to me.' So Agag came to him cautiously." And Agag, it's kind of funny, Agag kind of says this, it sounds like he's kind of being facetious here. You know, he's just like kind of like, I don't know, pompous. He says, "Surely the bitterness of death has passed." But Samuel says, "As your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women." And Samuel hacked Agag into pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. Now, I'm telling you all to tell you this. In the Bible, it made it very evident that you're either in bondage or you're at battle with your bondage. Because Saul had taken Israel to the next step where they were united again and they were actually a force to be reckoned with. Yeah. But the second that he stepped against God's will, he was in bondage again. And not only that, he carried his family into bondage that's estimated for about 500 years. To the extent that when Mordecai and Esther had to deal with the Agagites in their time period, that they had to wipe out a curse that had been placed on their family for estimated 500 years is what Bible scholars say. So you're either in bondage or you're battling your bondage. Alright, so Agag is literally hacked to bits by Samuel. It doesn't say his family. So that's where the Agagites carried on. Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to the house of Gibeah of Saul. And Samuel went no more to see Saul until the day of his death. Nevertheless, Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. This was a great man of God. Like, God had done great things through him. Like, he wiped out full countries. I always say that, Solomon was such a great king because his, David and Saul had literally killed all the enemies there were to battle against. And the ones they didn't, King David told Solomon, "Hey, before you become king, you have to wipe out these people." And he did, and they said that after he had destroyed his enemies, his kingdom was established. That's the difference right there between Samuel. In this story, that's the difference between Samuel and Saul. He knew that in order for their kingdom to be established, they had to do the will of God first. Just as David learned it the hard way, and he had to teach it to his son. Okay, later on, in 1 Samuel chapter 16 and verse 13, it says that Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of, this is David, in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel arose and went back to Ramah. This is like when God has him anoint David to be king. And we all know this story. It ends badly. In 1 Samuel chapter 22 and verse 17, then the king said to the guards who stood about him, this is when King Saul is hunting David, the one that God had anointed after him because he didn't do a good enough job. Then the king said to the guards who stood about him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand is also with David." Notice he said the priests of the Lord. He knows who he's battling now. When you let bondage get the best of you, you're fighting God. Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand is also with David. And because they knew when they fled, because they knew when he fled and did not tell it to me. But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to strike the priests of the Lord. See, even the servants of Saul were like, "Nah, dog, I'm out. I'm not attacking the priests of the Lord." But what happens anyways? His men, his closest men, his general of his army goes up and he kills the priests of God. You're either for God or you're against God. There's no in between. You're either in battle or bondage. So what happens? You're like, Andrew, but I ain't going to kill no priest of God. But how many times have we characterized ourselves by a sin that we've carried our whole lives and we're saying, well, I just can't get above it? How many times have we had obstacles in our lives and we're like, yeah, but it's just a little peril, you know? It's not that big of a deal. Man, it's just one little white lie. Man, Mike, it's just one drink, man. I'm just going to go out and hang out with my friends. It's just one drink. It's never just one drink for me. And how many times have we done that in our lives? We're like, God, it's just a little bondage. It's not that big of a deal. God, I know I'm going against your will, but it's minor detail. What happens to Saul? In 1 Samuel, like, not even just him, it's his family. His son Jonathan, he protected David. He still died. In 1 Samuel chapter 31, verses 1 through 4, it says, Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and fell slain in Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, because they were trying to cut the head off the snake. And the Philistines killed Jonathan, Benadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to the armor bearer, Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me. This man had been something that Israel prayed for. This man was raised up a Benjamite. They're always mentioned. Benjamites are like the strong men that are always picked to be leaders in the Bible. Not only that, there's a lineage there. That's a strong lineage. This man had been prayed for by Israel for years and years. Because they're like, God, everybody else has, an actual human king. We need a human king too. But he had such great, humble, strong beginnings. But he ended it by just one little bit of bondage. Well, man, Agag's a strong king. I get being a strong king because, I'm King Saul. What if I just save him and just some of the choice oxen? Not much, just enough to make a difference, he is my friend. I hate to do that to him. But just like that, he condemned his family for hundreds of years to a life of being under the hand of an Agagite who had a vengeance ploy because they'd killed all their family. Yeah. How many times have we had these things come up in our life and we're like, it's not that big of a deal. I forgot to pray today, but I pray every other day. I know I usually watch what I say, and I know you've been teaching me to do that, but today I've just lost it, you know how it is. I hate to tell you, church, but sometimes those what we see as minor details is just as like how when I preached about the stoning of Stephen, he was just giving out bread. If he had stopped giving out bread, he would have never made the impact that he made. So sometimes what we see as small details, it works into a great detail of God. See, Saul didn't realize he didn't know that down the line his family, Mordecai, would have been persecuted from an Agagite named Haman that was going to end up trying to kill all of them. But in this life, we're either a Mordecai or we are a Saul. There's no in between. Either we fight for what's right and we stretch the bounds that God has for us, and we're like, God, I will do anything. Is what happens after Haman dies. What do they say? Esther and Haman. Haman's already dead at that point. But Esther and Mordecai go to the king and they say, "Hey, king, we want permission to hunt down his family like he hunted ours." And what does the king say? He gives them approval. This is not an Israeli king. This is a Philistine king. They hunted the Agagites down with their own people. That's what our God does. See, we can either be a Saul and we make the wrong decisions and we support the people we can't, or we can be with God and hunt down the people that hunt us with their own people. That's the God we serve. So why do we have these problems where we're like, man, I got some bondage in my life, but I'm going to just deal with it? Why do we go through our lives like asking God why, instead of asking him, how can I fix this through you? Or just listening? Why is it we always have so many questions? Man, why did these people act like this? Why do I act like this around these people? Instead, why don't we hit our knees and we pray to God and say, God, take this bondage from me. I can't fix this without you, because I guarantee you, without God, Mordecai wouldn't have been able to hunt them Agagites. Shoot, without God, King Saul wouldn't have been able to do the great things with the Ammonites that he did with them, and how he hunted them because they threatened to poke out every right eye of the Israelis because they had broke their pact with them. Their pact that wasn't even a thing. They were just trying to hunt them for no reason. But so if we're dealing with bondage today, if we're dealing with, for me, it's like here lately, I'm in my own head. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. All these things that are going on in my life, with me, it's my head that I'm battling right now. But why am I dealing with that? I don't have to deal with that. I have an ultimate power that nobody can deny. A power that I can in a second I can kneel down and have God just bless me. I could ask him any question I want, and he's always listening to me. But why am I dealing with it? Why am I going through my life wondering if was what I did right? When I know that the man that does, the God that is right, is the right, he's the everything that's right, just, pure is of him. Why am I going to him more often? He made it, he has the answers. Why are we going through this bondage when we don't have to? Why are we letting ourselves be bound by these evil things that have plagued us our whole lives? Attack them today. Don't be a Saul and just be like, well, God, it's... I keep on thinking of the part on the Monty Python, the quest for the Holy Grail, when they're like pulling, the chase out, and then like one of the guys out, and he's like, there's all these women there, and he's like, maybe just a little peril. That's what I keep on thinking about. I don't know why. It's not really a good movie part to have stuck in my head. But that's how we are. We're like, God, just a little peril. It's not that big of a deal. I'm dealing with it just fine. I always hear that. I have a lot of stuff going on right now, but I'll be all right. No, maybe not. You don't know. We don't know what tomorrow holds. So instead of going through this bondage when we don't have to, and instead of letting these things plague our lives, why don't we go to the God that made it a way out? The God that made a whole nation that could literally was unstoppable. Why don't we go to the God that created the world so we might have a chance to meet him? Why don't we go to the God that can make rocks cry out? Yeah. I'm starting to get scared, the more people talk about what they believe, and it's none of it's biblical. We were talking about that a minute ago, but I'm starting to worry. If these rocks start singing, I'm getting out of town. Church, we don't have, if you have that bondage today, there is no point for you to have that bondage. And I know that you're like, Andrew, that sounds simple, but that's how it is. God made it simple. He kept it kiss. He kept to keep it simple, stupid, you know? He did that for us because, I mean, we act like we're complicated beings, but we're really not. We're not. Like, you look at these people. I've met people that had literally the same routine throughout their whole entire lifetime. And they go through the same routine. Well, man, I met one guy, he's like, I don't smoke all day, man, but I have to have that cigarette on the way to work. If not, I will not wake up. Like, why do we go through our lives like that? Just accepting our fate. Accepting, well, man, that Haman, he's hunting down my family and he's killing them, but I'm not going to say anything about it because, you know, I'm supposed to be in God's will. What? If we're dealing with bondage today, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And when something's wrong, you go to the doctor, you go to the ultimate physician. Life's too short to deal with the bondage in our lives. We got better things to worry about, like, I don't know, helping reach lost souls and helping people to see what we've seen. I don't know, being happy. Life's too short to not be happy and be proud of where you're at because God has brought you there. Be proud that you know God. So if you're dealing with any kind of bondage today, don't stop fighting it. Don't give up on me now. If you have something wrong with you today, pray to God. Hey, come over here. I'll pray with you right now. Like I said, you're either a Mordecai or you're a Saul, and I promise you don't want to be a Saul. Saul got to the point where he was so worried about the battle that he went to the last soothsayer that was left and brought back Samuel. That's in the Bible. And what does Samuel say? Well, he was mad, number one. His soul was mad, and he literally tells him, what are you doing? You know that God's not with you anymore. Like, how scared do you have to be to call a man back from the dead just to find out you're still screwed? Like, you think that, you think your life is bad now with God? Like, just think about it without Him. Church, life is too short to just worry about the stuff that's going on in our lives. But I can tell, like, I was talking, me and Ben were talking about this yesterday, but when you have a new heart from God, and you feel like everything's coming down on you because you're realizing every little sin that you do is wrong. Because God has made your heart a heart of stone to a heart of flesh. That's biblical. But the more you get out of your life that is bad, the closer you get to God. That is how it works. Because light and darkness can't inhabit the same space. So the less darkness, the more light. So if you're going through that bondage, it's dimming your light. It's keeping it under a bushel. And what does the Bible say about that? We've all read that story. Basically, like, the light will be smothered. That's basically what it says. But we don't want to be like that. We want to be Christ-like. So we want to shine that light. And in order to do that, we've got to get that darkness, that bondage out of our lives, because you're either at battle with that bondage, keeping everything away from your light, or you're covering it and snuffing it out. So today, if you are going through something, I'm not going to beat this horse till it's dead, but if you're going through something, don't let your light snuff out. Don't be a King Saul, because at the end of it, he was just a withered shell of a man that was like, please just thrust me through because God isn't with me anymore. And I don't want them to desecrate my body when I'm gone. How sad is that? A man that went from, I can smite every Ammonite because I know God is with me, to the extent of where he's standing there and telling his armor bearer, who is not even a very learned man, to thrust him through with his own sword because he's scared of what the enemy has for him. There's no in between. You're either a Mordecai or you're a Saul. How sad is that? A man that done such great things for God was scared at the end of his death because he knew God wasn't with him, because of one decision. And not only did he condemn himself and his sons to a bad death, but his family lineage. And it took a strong man that didn't have anything, where Saul had everything and he lost everything. Church, you don't know what stands on your bondage. With getting rid of your bondage. It could be condemning your sons, your daughters, your whole lineage to hell. Well, my grandma, she didn't pray really. Well, my grandpa, yeah, he was Christian, but man, I'll tell you one thing, those Christians are just like everybody else. There's been enough bondage in our world. There's been enough bondage in the lineages outside. It's about time that we take a stand on that. It's about time that we take a stand and we're like Mordecai and we're like, they may have killed our lineages, but we're getting even. I'm not going to let sin stop past this, or it's going to stop at this doorstep in this church. Everybody always talks about the things that are wrong with the church. It's about time that we claim war on that bondage that is in these churches, that we pray that these strongholds be broken. Enough sin has got through our doors. And I can't do it alone. You guys can't do it alone. It's going to take a stand from one or more. That's what the Bible says. You want to reach the world of today, stop letting garbage come from behind the pulpit. If I preach garbage, I want to know about it. It's about time that when we hear these preachers that are preaching hate, we shut them up because, hey man, that ain't biblical. You're standing behind a pulpit of God. Why are you preaching non-biblical things? That's biblical. I mean, Elijah killed him. I mean, but if we could, I'd like us all to stand. Sister Crystal, would you close us in prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, I just ask you to touch our fathers, and I ask you to touch our hearts, and I ask you to help us to learn to